All right, buckle up, everybody. We're heading to South Africa today, to the Zulu Kingdom, a kingdom that really left its mark on the region, and, it still echoes even to this day. We've got a really cool mix of sources to work with, YouTube videos, even some TikToks, and, of course, articles.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing spread. We're going to see how this kingdom went from these small family groups to a real powerhouse. We'll dig into their culture, what makes them tick, and the legacy they've woven into South Africa's story.
I'm really pumped to learn more about, especially, their military tactics. Like, how do they become so strong? And then, the role of cattle in their society. That seems super interesting. And then those traditions that are still alive today, the music and the dancing. It's going to be fascinating. But let's start at the beginning. How did this all begin?
Okay, so the Zulu people, or Amazulu, which means people of the heavens, are the biggest ethnic group in South Africa. And going way back, they migrated to the southeast part of the continent centuries ago. And at first, they lived in these, kind of scattered family groups, partly nomadic, always moving around, looking for better grazing land for their cattle and good hunting grounds.
I've always been fascinated by those early nomadic lifestyles. What was it about cattle that made them so central to, like, the Zulu way of life?
Oh, cattle were way more than just animals. They were a symbol of wealth, status, even had spiritual significance. Think about it. If you lost a cow back then, it wasn't just like an economic setback. It really hit your standing in the community hard.
Wow. Yeah, I see why that would be a huge deal.
Yeah.
And it's incredible how those traditions are still alive today, even in their politics.
Right. I mean, look at the Inkatha Freedom Party, a major political player in South Africa today. Its name actually comes from a special breed of cattle. It shows you just how deep those traditions run, even in modern politics.
That really speaks volumes. Okay, so we can't talk about the Zulu Kingdom without talking about the legendary King Shaka Zulu. He's often called, like, a military genius, right? So what was it about his leadership that transformed the Zulu people?
Okay, so Shaka's story is a fascinating one, and it's complex too. He's the one who brought those scattered Zulu tribes together and made them into a real power in the 19th century. But what made him a military genius wasn't just, like, ambition. He was an innovative thinker. He revolutionized the way the Zulus fought wars.
Okay, I need an example. How was his approach to warfare different? What did he change that made them so successful?
So back then, they used the traditional throwing spear, good for distance, but not so much for close combat. So Shaka brings in the shorter stabbing spear, the ikwa, and his warriors, they were trained to fight up close, using the ikwa with devastating results. And you combine that with the bullhorn formation, flanking maneuvers to surround the enemy, and bam, the Zulu army becomes this unstoppable force, conquering vast amounts of land.
So it wasn't just about strength, right? It was strategy and innovation that made Shaka such a powerful leader. But, our sources, they do mention a darker side to his reign. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Shaka's climb to power was definitely marked by ruthlessness. He wasn't afraid to get what he wanted, even if it meant arranging the assassination of his own half-brother Sigujana to take the Zulu throne. And to back up his military goals, he totally restructured Zulu society. No more system based just on family ties. He wanted people promoted on merit, on their military skills. He even reformed the way kids were brought up, making them into carriers for military supplies. It was like a total societal makeover, all designed to make his military stronger.
It's incredible how he reshaped their whole society to get what he wanted. But that level of power and ambition, it often comes with a price. What was the impact of Shaka's rule on the people around him?
Well, his rule was transformative, no question. But it was also undeniably violent. Against his enemies, sure, but tragically, sometimes even against his own people. There are stories of mass killings and forced migrations. All of that fed into this period of massive upheaval in southern Africa, what's known as the Emmekane. It's a tough legacy to grapple with, one that people are still debating and discussing today.
A real reminder that even the most influential figures, they have their complexities. Okay, but let's shift gears a little bit. We've talked about battles and power struggles, but what about the everyday lives of the Zulu people? What about their culture, the stuff that continues to fascinate people even today? What are some of the key things that define Zulu culture beyond their military achievements?
Yeah, one of the most striking things is this deep sense of community they have, the importance of family. Traditionally, men are the ones with the authority, and polygyny, where a man has multiple wives, that was a common thing. But even within that system, the family dynamic, it's actually pretty interesting.
Oh, I bet. What was the structure like in those polygamous families?
So, yeah, in a polygamous family, there's actually a hierarchy among the wives. The great wife, usually the mother of the heir, she had a particularly important role. Her opinions carried a lot of weight in the family.
Huh. So it's more nuanced than you might think. And there's that beautiful philosophy of Ubuntu that we see in many African cultures.
Yeah.
How does that play out in Zulu society?
So Ubuntu is more than just a word. It's a way of life. It's all about the interconnectedness of humanity, the idea that we're all linked together, that my well-being depends on yours and everyone else's. You see it in their everyday interactions, how they share their food, how they support each other. Even something as simple as kids traditionally eating from the same dish, that's a powerful symbol of Ubuntu. It teaches sharing and unity from a young age.
It's a great reminder that our individual actions, they really do ripple outwards and affect the whole community. All
Mm.
right, so we can't talk about Zulu culture without talking about cattle again.
Yeah.
You mentioned how important they were for their survival, but there's clearly a deeper cultural connection there.
Oh, absolutely. Cattle weren't just a practical thing. They represented wealth, status, even spiritual significance. When it came to marriage, they used cattle for bride wealth, what they call lobola, to seal the deal. A man's wealth, his standing in society, it was all tied to how many cattle he had and how good they were. It was like a physical representation of his success, his ability to provide for a family.
It's pretty amazing how something as, I don't know, basic as cattle
Hmm.
could carry so much cultural weight. Really makes you think about the depth of their traditions.
And these traditions, they're not just stuck in the past, they're still shaping Zulu identity in South Africa today. They mix with modern influences to make this really vibrant and evolving culture.
Speaking of modern South Africa, we came across a recent event that really sheds light on how complicated leadership can be in the Zulu Kingdom, the passing of King Goodwill Zwelithini in 2021. Can you walk us through how the whole succession process works and what happened?
Well, choosing a new king, it's steeped in tradition, but it also has to fit within modern-day laws. The late king's will was a big factor, but it didn't completely decide things. His third wife, Queen Mantfombi Dlamini Zulu, she stepped in as regent, a pretty powerful example of women taking on leadership roles.
That's interesting. So women did have some leadership roles, even in a system that's traditionally patriarchal.
Exactly. The Queen Mother has a very important position in the Zulu Nation, and in this case, she was the one trusted to manage the transition of power. But sadly, her time as regent was cut short. And choosing the new king, well, it became a real point of contention in the royal family.
So it sounds like there was some drama going on with the succession. How did it all end up?
Well, in the end, Msizulu Zwelithini, the oldest son of the late queen, he was named the new king. But it wasn't easy. Some big figures in the Zulu Nation opposed him. It just goes to show that even those really deep-rooted traditions, they can be open to different interpretations and get caught up in modern complexities.
Right. It just shows you that cultures aren't static. They change and adapt. And the Zulu people, they've shown this incredible ability to deal with those changes while holding on to their core identity.
You got it. The story of the Zulu Kingdom isn't just history, it's a living, breathing part of South Africa today. And next, we're going to look at another fascinating part of their story, their military clashes with the British during the colonial era.
Now, that is a period I'm really looking forward to learning more about. From what I've gathered, the Zulu warriors, they really gave the British Army a run for their money. So what led up to those confrontations?
Well, picture this. It's the late 19th century. The British Empire is expanding its reach across South Africa. They want land, they want resources, and they see the Zulu Kingdom, with its strong military and independent spirit, as a big problem for their plans.
Almost like a David versus Goliath situation, huh? The Zulus defending their homeland against a global power. What were some of the key things that made the tension worse and eventually led to war?
Well, one of the things that set it off was a border dispute. The British, they claimed a piece of land that the Zulus considered theirs, and they used that as an excuse to start a war. They gave the Zulu king, Cetshwayo, this ultimatum: disband your army, basically surrender to British rule.
That's a pretty bold demand. So what did King Sitshwayo do?
Cetshwayo was a proud and capable leader. He knew that if he gave in to the British, that would be the end of Zulu independence. He refused to back down, and that's how the stage was set for a showdown.
And that showdown led to one of the most famous battles in history, right? The Battle of Izanwana in 1879. What made that battle so important?
Izanwana, that was a huge victory for the Zulus and a humiliating defeat for the British. Picture this, you've got about 20,000 Zulu warriors, most of them armed with spears and shields. They're facing off against about 1,800 British soldiers who have modern rifles and artillery.
Whoa. Yeah, that's a huge difference in firepower. How in the world did the Zulus manage to win that?
They used their knowledge of the land to their advantage. They were agile and they were absolutely determined. They used their famous bullhorn formation, flanking the British, and just overwhelmed them with their numbers. It was a masterful display of tactics and pure courage.
A true testament to the skill and bravery of the Zulu warriors. But I know this wasn't the end of it. The British weren't just going to accept defeat, right?
Oh, no way. Just hours after the Zulus won at Isandlwana, there was another battle, the Battle of Rorke's Drift. This time, a much smaller British force, about 150 men, they managed to hold off a relentless Zulu attack. Wave after wave of warriors, they fought them all off.
Wow, so one day, dramatic wins and losses for both sides. What did Rorke's Drift mean for the whole conflict?
Rorke's Drift, even though it was a smaller battle, it became a symbol of how tough the British were. It helped them regain some morale, showed that even after Isandlwana, they could still stand up to the Zulus. But the war, it went on for months after that.
So in the end, who won this clash of empires?
In the end, the British, with their superior resources and firepower, they won. The Zulu Kingdom was defeated at the Battle of Ulindi in July 1879, and that was the end of their independence.
That must have been absolutely devastating for the Zulu people. What happened to the kingdom after that?
Well, the British, they didn't want any more uprisings. So they took the Zulu Kingdom and split it up into 13 smaller chiefdoms, each one controlled by them. A classic divide and conquer strategy. Take away their central power, weaken their resistance.
A sad reminder of how brutal colonialism could be. But even though they lost their political independence, their culture survived, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Zulu spirit, you can't crush that. Their traditions, their language, their sense of who they are, that wasn't going to disappear because of a military defeat. In fact, their resistance against the British, that became a source of inspiration for later generations of South Africans who were fighting for their own freedom and self-determination.
A powerful reminder that even in the face of huge challenges, culture and identity, they find a way to endure. But we've been talking a lot about battles and political power. What about the everyday lives of the Zulu people? What about their spiritual beliefs, their worldview?
That's where it gets really interesting. Their belief system is rooted in this deep connection to their ancestors, the spirits of those who came before them. They believe that those ancestors are still involved in the lives of the living. They offer guidance, protection, and can even step in and influence things.
So it's not just about remembering those who have died, it's about having an actual relationship with them. How do they honor their ancestors and communicate with them?
They have all sorts of rituals and practices. One common thing is to offer prayers and libations at a family altar. It's a way to show respect, ask for guidance, and seek their blessings. They also believe that their ancestors can communicate through dreams, visions, and signs in nature.
It sounds like a very connected worldview, like the spiritual and the material worlds are all intertwined. What about traditional healers? We came across some stuff about sangomas. They seem to play a pretty important role.
Oh, sangomas are deeply respected in Zulu communities. They're not just healers, they're diviners and spiritual advisors, too. They're thought to have a special link to the ancestral realm. They can talk to the spirits to understand things, figure out what's making people sick, and offer guidance.
So they're like a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the spirits. It's amazing how these traditional beliefs have stayed strong through so many centuries of change and upheaval.
It's a testament to how resilient their culture is, and it shows this basic human need to connect with something bigger than ourselves, a sense of belonging and continuity that goes beyond the limits of time and space.
You know, it strikes me, it's the contrast between those fierce warriors we've been talking about and this deep respect for their ancestors. It's like two sides of the same coin, strength and spirituality, all mixed together in a really powerful way.
You've hit on something really important about Zulu culture there. They have a strong warrior tradition, sure, but it's not just about brute force. It's about courage, discipline, and a deep connection to their land and their people. And their spiritual beliefs strengthen that connection by emphasizing how everything is interconnected.
It's a fascinating mix of practicality and deep spiritual understanding. But before we get too philosophical, we've got some TikTok and web sources that promise a vibrant glimpse into Zulu culture today. Get ready for some pulsating drums, energetic dances, and some incredible traditional attire. Stay tuned as we explore the living legacy of the Zulu Kingdom. All right, we're back and ready to unpack one of the most, captivating chapters in Zulu history, I guess, their confrontations with the British Empire. You were saying before the break this clash, it was inevitable. Can you set the scene for us a little? Like, what led to those epic battles?
Okay, try to imagine this. It's the late 19th century, and the British Empire is expanding its reach across South Africa, right? They want land, resources, the whole shebang. And they see the Zulu Kingdom, with its strong military and that independent spirit, as a major roadblock to their ambitions.
Yeah, it's like almost a David and Goliath story, you know, the Zulus defending their homeland against like this global superpower. What were some of the key things that escalated the tension and eventually led to war?
Well, one of the triggers was a border dispute. The British, they claimed a piece of land that the Zulus considered their own territory, and they used that as their excuse to go to war. They gave the Zulu king, Setshwayo, this ultimatum: disband your army and basically submit to British rule.
That's a pretty hefty demand.
Yeah.
What was Setshwayo's response?
Setshwayo, he was a proud and capable leader. He knew that if he gave in to the British, that would be the end of Zulu independence. He wasn't about to bow down to their demands, and so that's how the stage was set for this huge confrontation.
And that confrontation led to one of the most iconic battles in history, right? The Battle of Isandlwana in 1879. Why was that battle so significant?
Well, Isandlwana was a stunning victory for the Zulus and a really humiliating defeat for the British. Imagine around 20,000 Zulu warriors, most of them armed with spears and shields, going up against a British column of about 1,800 soldiers. And the British, they had modern rifles and artillery.
That's a massive difference in firepower.
Yeah,
How did the Zulus manage to pull off a victory like that?
they used what they had, right? They knew the terrain better, they were more agile, and they were incredibly determined. They used that famous bullhorn formation, flanking the British and just overwhelming them with their numbers. It was like a brilliant display of tactical thinking and just raw courage.
It really speaks to the skill and bravery of those Zulu warriors. But this wasn't the end of the story, was it? The British weren't going to just accept defeat that easily.
No, definitely not. In fact, just a few hours after the Zulu victory at Isandlwana, there was another battle, the Battle of Rorke's Drift. This time, a much smaller British force, maybe 150 men, they managed to hold off wave after wave of Zulu attacks.
Wow, so it was a day of dramatic reversals for both sides.
Yeah.
How did Rorke's Drift affect the overall conflict?
Rorke's Drift, even though it was a smaller battle, it became a symbol of British resilience. It helped them kind of restore their morale. It showed that even after Isandlwana, they could still fight back against the Zulus. But the war itself, it dragged on for months after that.
So ultimately, who prevailed in this clash of empires?
Well, the British, with all their resources and firepower, they won in the end. The Zulu Kingdom was defeated at the Battle of Ulundi in July 1879. That marked the end of their independence.
It must have been a crushing blow for the Zulu people. What happened to the kingdom after the war?
Well, the British, they were determined to prevent any future uprisings. So they took the Zulu Kingdom and divided it into 13 smaller chiefdoms, each one under British control. Classic divide and conquer, right? Dismantle their central power structure, weaken their resistance.
Yeah, that's a tragic reminder of the brutal realities of colonialism. But even though they lost their political independence, their culture, it survived.
Right, absolutely. You can't erase the Zulu spirit that easily.
Mhm.
Their traditions, their language, their sense of identity, those things weren't going to disappear because of a military defeat. Actually, you could say that their resistance against the British, it became a source of inspiration for future generations of South Africans who were fighting for freedom and self-determination.
Yeah, that's a great point. Even when facing immense challenges, culture, and identity, they find a way to persist. We've talked a lot about battles and political power, but what about the everyday lives of the Zulu people? Their spiritual beliefs, their way of seeing the world? What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's one of the most fascinating aspects of Zulu culture. Their belief system is deeply rooted in a connection to their ancestors, the spirits of those who came before. They believe those ancestors are still actively involved in the lives of the living. They offer guidance, protection, can even intervene in their affairs.
So it's not just about remembering the dead, it's about an ongoing relationship. How do they honor and communicate with their ancestors?
Well, they have various rituals and practices. One common way is offering prayers and libations at a family altar. It's a way to show respect, act for guidance, seek their blessings. They also believe that the ancestors can communicate through dreams, visions, signs in nature, things like that.
It's like a worldview where everything is connected, huh? The spiritual and material worlds are all intertwined. What about traditional healers? We saw some stuff about sangomas. They seem to play a significant role.
Oh yeah, sangomas are very respected figures in Zulu communities. They're not just healers, they're also diviners and spiritual advisors. They're believed to have this special connection to the ancestral realm. They can communicate with the spirits to gain insights, diagnose illnesses, offer guidance, that sort of thing.
So they're kind of like a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the spirits. It's really amazing how these traditional beliefs have managed to survive through centuries of change and turmoil.
It's a real testament to their cultural resilience. And it speaks to this, I don't know, maybe a fundamental human need to connect with something bigger than ourselves, a sense of belonging and continuity that goes beyond the limits of time and space.
It's interesting. I'm struck by the contrast between those fierce warriors we've been talking about and this deep reverence for their ancestors, like two sides of the same coin, strength and spirituality, all existing together.
Yeah, you've touched on something very central to Zulu culture there. They have this strong warrior tradition, no doubt, but it's not just about brute force. It's about courage, discipline, and a deep connection to their land and their people. And their spiritual beliefs, they reinforce that connection by emphasizing how everything is connected. Everything is part of a bigger whole.
It's a fascinating mix of practicality and deep spiritual insight. Okay, but before we get too carried away with the philosophical stuff, we've got some TikTok and web sources that promise a really vibrant glimpse into Zulu culture today. So get ready for some pulsating drums, energetic dances, and some incredible traditional attire. We're going to explore the living legacy of the Zulu Kingdom. Okay, so we're back and ready to really dive into what Zulu culture is like today. When I think of Zulu culture, I always picture those warriors, those fierce warriors we talked about. But the sources we've got, they paint a much bigger, more vibrant picture. So let's start with music and dance. They seem like such essential parts of how Zulus express themselves.
Oh, absolutely. Music and dance for them, it's not just entertainment. It's woven into the very fabric of their society. Imagine, the sound of drums echoing through a village as people move together, their bodies telling stories, expressing emotions, honoring their traditions. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, the TikToks we saw really capture that energy.
Yeah.
And the sheer variety of dances is incredible. Can you give us an idea of what some of these dances look like and what they mean?
Well, there's a dance for pretty much every occasion, each one with its own movements and symbolism. Like the Indalamu, for instance. It's a warrior dance, traditionally done by men, before a battle. Picture this. They're stamping their feet, chanting together, wielding their shields and spears, mimicking the moves of combat. It's all about strength, unity, and that fierce warrior spirit.
I bet that's an amazing sight to see. And then there's the Ngungu, a dance done by young women.
Yeah. The Mgungu, that's a celebration of womanhood, often performed during those coming-of-age ceremonies. Imagine young women dressed up with colorful beads and these elaborate headdresses, swaying gracefully as they sing and celebrate becoming adults. It's beautiful, really poignant, a real expression of feminine power and community.
And the beadwork, those headdresses, the traditional clothes, it's also stunning. What's the significance of clothing in Zulu culture?
Clothing, it's not just about covering up. It's like a way of communicating, expressing your identity, status, even whether you're married or not. Married women, for example, often cover their heads and bodies as a sign of respect. But young unmarried women, they might dress in a way that's more revealing with elaborate hairstyles, to attract attention. And the beadwork, all those intricate patterns and colors, they can convey messages about your clan, social standing, even personal beliefs.
It's like wearing your story for everyone to see. Okay, so we can't talk about culture without talking about food. What can you tell us about Zulu cuisine?
Zulu cuisine is just as diverse and vibrant as their culture itself. It's traditionally based on agriculture, with an emphasis on fresh vegetables, grains, and legumes. Like they have this dish called futuo. It's kind of like a hearty porridge made from ground maize. It's a staple in many households. And they're really good at using wild greens and herbs, which adds these unique flavors and makes the food even healthier.
Sounds delicious and resourceful, too. I've noticed that meat doesn't seem to be as central in their diet. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Meat was traditionally something for special occasions like feasts or celebrations. Cattle were too valuable to be slaughtered for everyday meals, but when they did eat meat, it was often cooked over an open fire, which gives it a smoky flavor. And they have this delicacy called amasi. It's like a fermented milk drink, similar to yogurt. It's supposed to be really tasty and good for your digestion, too.
Okay, now I'm getting hungry. It's amazing how food can tell you so much about a culture. Speaking of things that tell us a lot, we've talked a bit about their spiritual beliefs, but I'd love to dig a little deeper. Can you tell us more about how the Zulus view the afterlife and the role of the ancestors?
Well, the Zulus believe that death isn't the end. It's more like a transition to a different realm, the spirit world. And the ancestors, those who have passed on, They're not gone. They're still involved in the lives of the living. They can give guidance, protection, even influence things that happen, but it's a two-way street. The living have to honor their ancestors through rituals, prayers, offerings, that sort of thing.
It's like they're keeping the connection between the physical world and the spiritual world alive. What are some of the specific things they do to honor their ancestors?
One common practice is offering libations, which is basically pouring a little bit of beer or other traditional drinks onto the ground. It's a way to communicate with the ancestors and keep them happy. They also might leave food offerings at a family altar or even consult a sangoma to get guidance from the spirit world. Funerals are also hugely important in Zulu culture. They believe that if someone isn't buried properly, according to tradition, their spirit might not be able to find peace.
So it's not just about saying goodbye, it's about making sure the deceased has a smooth transition into the spirit world. Do they have a specific story about how the universe was created or a belief system that explains where everything came from?
Well, they don't have one single creation myth, but their oral traditions tell stories about a supreme being. They often call him Unkulunkulu, and he's the creator of all things.
Mhm.
But Unkulunkulu, he's seen as kind of distant, like he withdrew from the world after creating it. And that's why the ancestors are so important. They act like go-betweens, connecting the living to the divine.
So it's a belief system that emphasizes a connection to the divine, but also a strong sense of responsibility for keeping things balanced between the worlds. Looking back at everything we've learned about the Zulus, their history, their culture, their spiritual beliefs, I'm really struck by their resilience. I've faced so much, from the rise and fall of their kingdom to the pressures of colonialism and all the complexities of modern South Africa, and yet their traditions and their spirit, they haven't been broken.
Yeah, it's incredibly inspiring, isn't it? Their story is a testament to the power of culture, the importance of community, and the strength of the human spirit. It makes you think about your own place in the world, your connection to those who came before you, and your responsibility to the generations that will come after.
I totally agree. This has been an amazing journey. We've only scratched the surface, of course, but I hope this deep dive has given you a taste of how rich and complex the Zulu Kingdom is.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe it sparked an interest for you to go and learn even more.
Yeah, keep those minds curious and never stop exploring all the different cultures out there in the world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.